Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Catherine Potts. I'm the Chief Learning and Engagement Officer here at Norman Rockwell Museum, and I'm delighted to welcome you all for what I know will be a really fascinating conversation with artist Teresa Fasolino and Chief Curator Stephanie Plunkett. Teresa's work, I think as most of you know, is featured in the exhibition upstairs, Mystery and Wonder, which will be on view until June 16th. And this exhibition brings together a group of artists whose works explore fantasy, fairy tales, magic, and in Teresa's case, murder, in the form of mystery book covers. You'll have a chance to hear Teresa and Stephanie discuss Teresa's art and her career as a working illustrator. But first, to introduce them both a little more formally, Teresa Fasolino lives and works in New York City. She studied at the School of Visual Arts, where she currently teaches courses in illustration and in the history of illustration. And the diverse and very eclectic roster of Teresa's clients include the United States Postal Service, Grand Union, Nabisco, Penguin Putnam, and the United States government, and Pfizer, New York Times Magazine, and as you'll hear, the restaurant in New York, Trattoria del Arte, so more on that to come. Her work has been exhibited at the New York Academy of Sciences, the New York Historical Society, the School of Visual Arts Gallery, and the Norman Rockwell Museum. And her work is also included in the collections of Nabisco, Grand Union, in private collections, and in the permanent collections of the Society of Illustrators, the Smithsonian, the Baseball Hall of Fame at Cooperstown, and of course, the Norman Rockwell Museum. She was also a member of the first Illustrators Advisory Board at the Norman Rockwell Museum, which she helped to establish the museum's exhibition and collections departments. My colleague, Stephanie Haboush Plunkett, is the chief curator and the Rockwell Center director of the Norman Rockwell Museum. And she is the curator of many exhibitions related to the art of illustration, including last year's Tony Sarg Genius at Play, Imprinted, Illustrating Race and Enduring Ideals, Rockwell. Also, Roosevelt and the Four Freedoms, Inventing America, Rockwell and Warhol, and The Unknown Hopper, Edward Hopper as illustrator, as well as our current installation, Mystery and Wonder. And she's also co-curator of our other current exhibition, the Leo Leone exhibition, which is also on view at the museum. Her recent publications include Drawing Lessons from the Famous Artist School, Norman Rockwell Drawings, 1911 to 1976, Imprinted, Illustrating Race, Tony Sarg, Genius at Play, and Leo Leone, Storyteller, Illustrator, and Designer. And she's currently at work on What Me Worry, the art and design of Mad Magazine, which is going to be our hopefully fantastic show opening in June. So we are all very excited about that. Before I turn the program over to Teresa and to Stephanie, I also want to invite you all back on May 18th for another program with one of the Mystery and Wonder artists. This time it will be Joan Hall, who makes beautiful collages, and she'll be leading us through a kind of step-by-step process of putting together one of her surrealist-inspired collages. So please join me in welcoming back Teresa Fasolino.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to see you. There's a famous illustrator walking in, Elwood Smith. Oh my God, Elwood, who lives in Great Barrington, and we have a wonderful collection of his work as well. So happy to see you all today. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Stephanie Plunkett, as Catherine said, and I want to just tell you a little bit about where the exhibition Mystery and Wonder sort of came from. We are a museum that is dedicated to the art of illustration. So that is unique in the country in many ways. And so this is art that has been published, and usually by assignment. So artists have this very difficult task of balancing both the needs of their clients with their own aesthetic sensibilities. And it's really amazing to see how unique and personal their art is, even though they have to satisfy a commercial demand. So we very fortunately have the world's largest collection of art by Norman Rockwell. And so that means that we have about 865 original works by Rockwell. And we also have a wonderful archive of probably almost 500,000 objects, and his studio. His last working studio is on the grounds. But we also began collecting the work of other illustrators because, of course, the field of illustration goes back centuries. And so we do have work spanning from, I guess, about the mid-19th century to today. And we represent the work of more than 300 artists and now have about 25,000 artworks in our collection. So we very fortunately obtained, through Teresa's generosity, an incredible collection of 29 of her remarkable murder mystery covers. And they are truly, if you've seen them in the galleries, jewels of our collection. They're just absolutely beautiful, mystifying, and spectacular. So as we were thinking about Teresa's work as a centerpiece for a potential installation, we realized that a lot of artists and assignments that they have taken on have explored the concept of some kind of mystery, because people love mysteries. I mean, how many of you love a mystery, right? Who's your favorite mystery writer? Do you have one? Or television show?
I love Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah, exactly. Alfred Hitchcock, definitely. Oh, yes. Good, okay.
Laura Childs, because there were characters in Charleston.
Yes, Laura Childs, absolutely. Wonderful. Oh, okay. So, you know, I think the notion of a good mystery is very popular. And so, as I say, what we discovered in looking at our collection was that there were quite a number of artists who had taken that topic on. And they went from, I'd say, about the mid-20th century with pulp magazines and editorial work for popular periodicals like the Saturday Evening Post and, I don't know, Ladies' Home Journal, right up until pretty much today. So the exhibition spans everything from editorial illustration to children's books. We have some amazing woodcut prints that appeared in a book by James Grashow. So all in all, the exhibit contains the work of 17 artists, both historical and contemporary, including 2 Rockwells that had a little bit of mystery behind them. But today, we're just absolutely thrilled to have Teresa with us. So thank you, Teresa.
Thank you
Yes,
for inviting me.
very fortunate
Thank you guys
to
for coming.
go back a long way with Teresa. But we'd love it if you would just tell us a little bit about your training and how did you get started as an artist? Did you always want to be an illustrator?
Well, I don't think I knew what an illustrator meant. I liked to draw and eventually liked to paint. And only when going to School of Visual Arts, when I met people like Marshall Arisman and Robert Weaver, did I figure out what I could actually do with what I like to do, which is draw and paint, and still make a living at it. The idea of being in a gallery always seemed like a little bit weird and didn't somehow seem right for me. And this seemed like you could still, as you said earlier, you could still get yourself into it even though you were collaborating and working with a client to produce something that they also needed.
So maybe we'll start a little bit with your mystery novel covers. How did you get into doing the mystery novel covers?
Well, like most illustrators start out doing editorial work, and that's for magazines. You know, that's sort of the first place that people will see your work. It's visible. And then I think maybe 5 or 6 years later, I started to get some book jacket covers. But I like doing them because there's a longer time. You have a longer time to do it. And because my work is, you know, it's painted and it takes me a while, I'm sort of a plodder. So it's better, you'd rather have a month or 2 months than 2 days or a week to do something like you do editorial. So I like to read, and like Stephanie said, we all like mysteries. And in the early 90s, I got my first job from Penguin, from an art director, Joni Friedman. So a lot of the work upstairs, actually I think most of it, except for the poster, is for Penguin. And Penguin actually goes way back. That Penguin the man who founded Penguin in England was the one who created the modern paperback that's called a mass market, which means it was sold. He had the innovative idea that you didn't have to go to a bookstore. You could go anywhere to buy a book, and you'd put up those racks, and you could go to a drugstore or a train station and buy a book. So a lot of the modern books are actually called mass market. And so from Joni, she gave me the Niall Marsh series, which you see upstairs. And I was supposed to do all 33. You know, Niall Marsh is like Agatha Christie, you know, that period, the classic detective. And of course, she was long gone by then. You know, she was writing in the 30s and 40s. But her estate somehow pulled back the rights, so I wound up only doing 9 of them. And they're upstairs. And then the other pieces that are upstairs are also from Penguin, but they're from a more contemporary husband and wife team. And they're known as cozy mysteries. And they're usually, you have an amateur sleuth or a famous person as a sleuth. And sometimes they're set in periods, but well-researched. And there's no real graphic violence that kind of takes place off stage. So that's what the genre cozy mystery means.
Great. Do you want to share a little bit about what we're seeing here?
Well, these are Niall Marsh, and she actually was born in New Zealand. And she was a painter. She was an actress. She produced theater plays. So a lot of the pieces because she painted and was involved in the theater. A lot of them have those themes. And this one is like the classic country house where there's a murder takes place in a country house, and it's snowing, you know, so the group of people who don't really like each other can't leave. Very Agatha Christie, but also Niall Marsh. And I honestly don't remember the plot of this one. But my paintings are sort of like narrative still lifes. You know, contemporary mysteries for adults don't usually have characters.
So when you're working on a cover, how much art direction do you get? What do you get in advance of, let's
Well,
just
I
say,
think
starting a
it's sort of
project?
changed over the years. Like I think with the Niall Marsh, I think they just handed me the manuscript. And of course, there was no live author to complain, so maybe that was the difference. But these days, they're very, you know, I don't get a whole manuscript, which is a shame. And they'll give you suggestions that came out of the cover conference that they have with all the editors. So you get a kind of couple of pages and suggestions of what to put in the cover. So it's different from when I started. These are Niall Marsh also, and you know, so there's a dead body, but one doesn't really show him. So the fish was kind of a stand-in for the dead body in this one. And this took place in a bar, and we have the pipe upstairs, actually.
Yes.
The pipe is
Beautiful.
upstairs.
Yeah.
And the dartboard, there was something to do with the murder, with either the weapon was the poison in the dart or the brandy. I don't remember which. So it's a narrative still life with clues.
So I guess there's that old adage, you know, do we judge a book by its cover?
Yes, right.
And so in reading about your work, I think a lot of the authors felt that association with your covers was really important because that was the signal that, you know,
Yes,
it
I
was
think
a quality
the cover
book.
is important because somebody said you can't judge a book by its cover, but you certainly can sell a book by its cover. So the idea is to attract somebody, even if maybe they didn't come in interested in buying anything, but to attract them to come pick it up, and then have enough interest when they pick it up that, you know, they can study it. And
Yeah. So I think I wondered, are you a mystery reader?
yeah, but I also like the PBS dramas also,
Yeah.
mysteries.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those are great as well.
Yeah. And these are for Jane Austen. Someone got the idea to turn every Jane Austen novel into a mystery, and those are for tour books. And this, actually, I'm still doing this series. It's Booktown, so this is more contemporary.
So are you having to think about placement for type, how the image will sit on the cover when you're actually painting the covers?
Well, when you do the first of a series, like this was actually the first of the Booktown series, so generally speaking, I would just give them the painting and they would figure out where to put the type on a banner across the top. And then they follow, once you have the series look set, then you know where the type is going to be, so you just, it's easier then at that point. But usually they work around the painting, and you could see how it looks with the type. This is a newer piece.
Beautiful.
Anybody have
Questions?
any questions or anything?
Your illustrations have enormous depth of field, almost three-dimensional. How do you accomplish that?
It's called aerial perspective, where things get more faded as they go away. And one of the things that I went to Italy when I was, I think, in my third year of college, and that just knocked me out seeing all the paintings. And that's one of the things I think that really I just wanted to copy, is the way the landscapes went back in space. So interesting that you picked that out.
Yeah, that's really important.
Yeah.
And I think using windows and doors that frame scenes.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love framing devices within the picture.
And another concept we were talking about, as long as we were talking about type, is a lot of times you have to have things kind of in the middle, because you can't reverse type out of something that's not dark, and you can't put white type over something.
Well, you asked the perfect questions for this, because, okay, that was my painting, and that was what the art director, now with Photoshop, they can just change your piece. And I think it looks fine, but I'm sure that's why he did it, so that he could put his white type. He probably darkened it because he wanted to do the white type. And it looks fine, so I'm not complaining. But with Photoshop, they can change things. They have the
Did he
ability.
ask permission to do that, or was that?
He showed it to me, but there are art directors that don't ask. They just change
Are
something.
you ever disappointed by what they do to it?
Once I let out a screech. I try to be very good, and I say, oh, it's good. Yeah, I did a good job. But once they changed a book, it was a bookcase. It's like made of wood, and they changed it to a bright blue-green.
Oh,
And I just like screeched. But this is fine, yeah.
Check's still deposited though, right?
That's right, yeah.
hopefully.
Norman Rockwell
Most
would appreciate
definitely.
that.
So what would be the timeline on a major cover for you?
Well, I'm working on one of these right now, and he gave it to me in March. I have till June to do it. So, I mean, that fits, because I teach, that fits in, really well with that.
Yeah.
Like these actually are mysteries that are based on recipes. So every year, she picks out whatever is fashionable in cuisine. So this time it was boards. I didn't even know what a board. Does anybody know what a board? Okay. So this was the diva goes overboard. That's the title. They always have cute titles.
So would you explain what a board is?
Those are everything on a board.
On a
So
board,
it's
got
like
it.
that's how you serve it to your wedding party or whatever, is it has to be on a board. So to set this up, I wasn't going to buy all that food, but I set out all the boards and they were empty. And then I looked for pictures of the food to put in. And that's my friend's cat. And I like when I have friends who will lend me their cats to
Francis
pose.
Jetter, also
Francis
an
Jetter,
illustrator,
yeah.
wonderful illustrator, yeah.
Francis's cat, Monty. More cats.
You do often integrate animals into your
Well,
scenes.
once again, I used to enjoy sneaking them in here and there, but now they ask you for them. It's like, this year we want the cat, and this year we want the dog.
What does that do for an artwork? I mean, of course, Rockwell put animals in his
Well, I
work
think
often.
people buy it more.
Yeah.
People like things. We like things with animals, right?
Yeah, true. Well, I think you're going to take us through a little bit of the process of creating a cozy book cover.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's the finish. This is the Diva series. It's the same series, actually.
Okay. So are there certain qualities in this series that you have to or want to include?
It always has food. So it depends on, what they're serving. And I don't remember what this was. It looks like everything is red. It's like strawberries, maybe. I honestly don't know. So this is what the art director would present to the cover conference, which is all the editors are not visual people; they're literary people. So they have a complete drawing presented to them how it would look in the design. And this is one of the photos I would take for myself. I would set up the still life and take it. And actually, that's a stock photo. So we rented the stock photo so I could just have the room, and then I changed things. I changed the table, obviously, and that's a stock photo of a dog that I rented also, since I didn't have a dog. And another painting, so this is the finish.
And that's part of the same series.
Yeah, so it's the same series, actually. It's the Diva. And so my thumbnails, and I use tracing paper, and then I'll tape down. If I change something, I'll kind of tape it down so that I'm not like redoing the drawing over and over and over. But there are my thumbnails. I tried different ways. And I don't have to show my thumbnails, so luckily. Like this. Yeah. And then this is about 16 by 20 is my favorite size, or 18 by 24. So once again, it's some kind of food is the recipes of the year for this. And that's a stock photo, and then I changed it. So my chair, some dogs. And these are the drawings I would hand to the art director. And I usually, to make them think that it's one drawing, but to make them feel they have a choice, I usually give them more than one dog, more than one cat. And then they get to pick it out.
So from this
They're
point, are there a
happy.
lot of changes usually that are
No.
requested?
No, there really aren't. I get very few changes, I gotta say. I used to use it on canvas, which I would glue down, but now it's ampersand, which is a gesso board. It's a piece of masonite that is gessoed beautifully for you, and you can buy it. So it's a smooth surface.
So would you normally paste the type over the drawing, or
That's
would
what
the art director
the
do
art
that?
director does that, and then he sends it back to me to make sure I have enough bleed and everything. So that's how it's going to be. So if I have to add bleed, I add some extra space bleed. And that's the finish, yeah.
Yeah, so it's so beautiful. How do you think about your palette of colors when you're actually working on something like this?
I look at last year's and try not to be like it, or they will complain.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So it just has to be different.
They usually send me, like, for a series like this that's going on for many, many years, they'll send me, like, thumbnails of the last few that I've done. And I just kind of look back and try not to have the same colors.
Mm-hmm.
So you get to keep the original.
Yes, you get to keep the
Do
originals.
they just take a high-quality photograph?
Well, that's changed, over the years, and Elwood will remember. We used to, I used to carry everything to the office, and then they would take it away and have it photographed, and then you'd get it back. But now, some people will scan it themselves. I have a photographer come to me, and then I just send the high-res digital shot, so it never leaves my studio. Up until the pandemic, I was actually still bringing the art, maybe the last illustrator to do it, but the pandemic killed that.
Do you ever sell your final?
I have, yeah, I have sometimes to authors,
Oh,
yeah, which is nice, yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Teresa, back in the day, especially Playboy would keep the originals.
That's right.
Did you have a number of your originals
I-
kept by the-
I had a couple. I did work for Playboy, but do you remember there was a moment when all the artists got together
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and they had big meetings and they demanded to get their work back?
yeah,
Yeah.
that was wonderful.
Yeah, I remember that.
Keep the originals.
Yeah. Otherwise, they used to just take them before.
So do you leave more negative space at the top and the bottom since you're factoring that in?
I make sure I leave enough bleed. Yeah, I always add on a little,
Gotcha.
just in case it has to shift around or something. You don't want them to run out of space.
I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the work that you've done that really references art history, because you have a very classical style of painting, and I think these wonderful Renaissance connections seem to be there Is that intentional? And did you always love classical
Yes,
painting?
I did, yeah.
Would you like to say a little bit about this? What was this
Well, this
done
is
for?
actually a takeoff on Lucas Chronic, so it's a Northern, it's not Italian, it's a German. This was kind of a crazy job. It was an advertising job. I don't think it ever actually got printed. It was supposed to be a brochure, and he wanted Adam and Eve in spacesuits, so I don't know why, but it's gotten to be very popular. I've been asked for many reprints of this recently, including like a 10-foot screen in a restaurant in France. Yeah, so
Wow.
I don't know.
Oh, that's so
Weird.
interesting. Yeah, it's wonderful.
That's my rabbit. One of my rabbits, June.
And rabbits appear in your art
Yes,
fairly
'cause
frequently.
I don't have rabbits at the moment, but I've had a number of pet rabbits. And it's Tempus Fugit, time passes, and June died right after this. This was for the Society of Illustrators. They had a step-by-step book, and that's what this was for.
So this looks as though it really has the feeling of having been gold leaf. Did you actually gold leaf that?
This was not gold leafed, but I have in the past done some gold leaf, but I don't think this one was. That's a tribute to my rabbits that just, both of them passed away. I just did that for myself.
Yeah, and this is fairly recent.
Yeah, like last year, I think.
Now, can anybody guess what this was an advertisement for?
Beer. Yes.
You got it.
Watney's beer. That's an ad.
Now, what made you decide to use this theme? You know, introduce Henry VIII and the beer and making that
I think
connection.
they wanted, it was advertising, so they do kind of tell you a lot of what they want for advertising. But I did so many things with Henry VIII for a while. Like I really got to know Henry. Here he is with Jane Seymour and his entourage, and they're all drinking their Watney's beer.
So is there more art direction with advertising than there is,
Yes,
let's just
yeah,
say, with
yeah,
editorial
yeah.
work?
More clients and,
There he is again.
and one painting sank behind the other.
Oh,
That's
yeah, so I apologize. Those are two separate works.
paintings, yeah, they joined up.
And these were both for young adult novels?
Young adult, and they're princesses, but there's Henry VIII again. That's Bloody Mary as a young princess, and that's Anne Boleyn.
And you mentioned something about, you know, with young adult novels having to introduce all of the characters very
characters,
clearly, as opposed
Yeah.
to, let's just say, with a novel for adults.
Right, where you maybe show the back of a character or you don't show the character. It's like a difference. I mean, you can see that if you look through like the Times book review and you look at any of the adult mysteries, they're always like the back of somebody or the shadow.
Have you all had that experience of reading a book and the character looks in your mind just like the cover, or maybe
Different,
is in conflict with that?
yeah,
Right?
different.
Yeah. But speaking of your mention of glazing, do you do glazing
I
with
do,
layer on top of layer?
yeah, I do. I
Do you
use
want to say a little
glazing.
bit about how that works?
Well, does anybody know glazing besides Howard? Who knows what glazing is? Anybody else know? It's transparent paint. So you have a underpainting underneath. Let's say you had a red and then you wanted the darker red. So you would take a transparent rose red on top of a more orange red, and you use a medium with it so that it's almost like a pane of glass, so you can actually see through. And of course, the master of that was, the old masters did it, like Titian, you know, if you go way back. But more contemporary is Maxfield Parrish, and he was all glazes, which I can't even imagine how he did it, because each one has to dry, and then he would put a retouch varnish in between, and then another layer. And so that's why it actually looks like a slide, like you're holding up like a screen, you know, you're holding up something to light. Because you're not mixing the colors, you're not mixing them on your palette, and where they would maybe get muddy, you're having a mixture of a pure color, one after another. This is when I painted in acrylic. So I don't know if you can tell
What was the difference for you in terms of making the change? What made you
I don't know.
decide to make the change?
Wasn't satisfied. The acrylic is flatter, I think. It's more graphic, which is okay. But this is for the New York Times, Sophisticated Traveler. I did a lot of work for the Times, for Sophisticated Traveler and Dining Page.
And actually,
And that was my first
posters
bunny.
as well,
Yeah.
yeah.
And this is acrylic also. This is back to the 80s.
That's a big bunny.
That's McGeorge bunny.
And this was a poster for the School of Visual Arts?
Yeah. And that was my mouse too, Ignatz.
So they have a tradition, the School of Visual Arts, of choosing, an important illustrator, often on their staff, I guess, right? Who teaches there to create the annual poster. So this was an important assignment. It would have been seen very widely.
Yeah. It was fun too. I mean, here you don't get instruction, just do what you want.
So are there other artists that you particularly admire who have been influential in terms of your direction?
Oh, well, there's so many wonderful artists. It's hard to say. I mean, I started with the Italian Renaissance, and then I kind of moved to like a Giorgione, and then to of course Vermeer. Who doesn't like Vermeer? And the Dutch still lifes and American landscapes, and of course lots of illustrators as well. These were huge posters that. There was a point in the 80s when Milton Glaser was hired to redesign the Grand Union supermarkets, all the products and the supermarket itself. So he had an idea to have these huge posters in the Grand Union supermarkets, and this was over the chicken parts. So it was a little bit weird.
So was it hard to paint these animals? Because, I mean, you paint many different kinds of animals, and I always found that animals were difficult to paint.
Well, I don't know. I kind of like doing this. It was big, though. These are 4 foot, and
Right.
Grand Union bought the originals, so I don't have any of these originals, which may be a good thing because I would have no place to put them. And this was also for Grand Union.
It's magnificent.
Yeah, so here's like the ideal job because they just tell you paint something nice and use all the fruit and vegetables that we sell, and that was it. That's a Peaceable Kingdom, and that is a Earth Day poster for the U.S. State Department. And they still give them out every year. I've seen, different artists.
Where's the original of that?
That's actually in the permanent collection of the Society of Illustrators.
It's gorgeous.
Thank you.
Teresa? And how do even people do the matchmaking with the book covers or any of the commissions?
Well, you would carry your little portfolio around in those days, right? And that was fun because you got to meet people. You would call up and they'd say they'd see you, and I'd take my portfolio, and then sometimes they just pull magazine stories out of the drawer and hand them to you. But if they didn't have something, they would say, "Oh, why don't you go see so and so and so and so and so and so?" And that's how it was fun. That's how it worked. I mean, that's when I got I did all this work for TV Guide. I can't even imagine. It's like these huge paintings. When I saw my house, I had these paintings like this big.
And TV Guide had an enormous subscription, like one
They-
of the biggest
they sold-
subscriptions
that's
in the
right.
whole country.
Millions
Does
of
anybody
people.
remember TV Guide?
Yeah. Millions. That was the most selling magazine, was TV Guide.
How do
It's
you get a
amazing.
commission like this one for the government?
Well, I used to do promotions and stuff. I don't do anything anymore, which is why I don't have a lot of work. But in those days, we used to do promotions, and you put your new work out, and that's how I would get something like this.
And there were also a number of annuals, right, that would.
That's right. We would go
where
and
you could place your work,
and
an illustrator could place
now there
their
still
work
are
in-
annuals.
in
I
the
don't know
book.
how they work, but we used to
Right.
go and used to spend $1,000 or $2,000 to go do a double-page spread.
Right.
3,000, right?
It's the black book and.
Yep.
Right.
Workbook and
American Illustration.
the Graphic Artist Guild, American
Showcase,
Showcase, the Graphic Artist Guild. So that's how we got work. And then Jackie Diddell at the time, which was my rep, she would send out these beautiful promotions, and then the work would, just kind of come in.
Right, so all the art directors would receive these books
Yeah.
gratis but the illustrators were really paying for the books
Paying for it,
because
yeah.
they were paying to have their work showcased.
Yep.
And you have a particularly affinity
it's
for horses.
A
Do you want to say
weird
a little bit about
midlife crises of falling in love with horse racing and horses. So that's the great Ruffian. Ruffian was one of the greatest fillies, but she died at Belmont Park, and they just dug her up and sent her bones back to her birthplace, which was very upsetting. She was buried at Belmont. These I did for myself. So they're just portraits. That's Rachel, Alexandra, and these are two contemporary great horses, great fillies, and that's Zenyatta.
And I know that this comes also from a place of caring about
Yeah,
the fate of
yes,
racehorses
yeah,
once they
I
are
do.
either
I'm
retired or
involved
hurt.
in that also, but they're so gorgeous. You know, if you like, I just got knocked out when I saw them close up. I couldn't believe how beautiful they were. So
Those look like Santa Anita on the right.
that is, yes, she was at Santa Anita. That's right.
Ah, well, I'm-
And this is Saratoga.
yeah.
I
Rachel.
love your clouds on that.
Yeah,
That's Maxfield's.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
that's
Yeah,
nice, yeah.
and it could steal his colors because it's all written exactly what colors he used to glaze. And that's Belmont. And so they knocked down Belmont and they're going to rebuild it to look like an airport terminal. And they're not going to use this historic paddock. So this is like, I thought it was the most beautiful place in the world, this paddock. It'll be gone only in my painting and my photos and memory.
Thank goodness you captured it. Right?
Yeah. So this was for the New York Times. So there was a period I did a lot of work. There was a lovely art director, Nikki Klein, who I used to, we became friends, but she gave me a lot of work. And this was for the Sophisticated Traveler, and it's State Flowers. And this was the most, they reprinted it like 20 years later and said it was the most popular art picture that they ever had. And that's for the Times, too. That was the dining page. Now that I went out and bought, I went to Union Square in Manhattan, I bought all those things and I lined them up, you know, and took photos so that they would be lit the same way. This was actually for a Scholastic. They had a magazine that went to high schools, but it had some good literature in it. And that's what this was, an editorial piece. But they did so much stuff, Scholastic. See, now if you were going looking for, telling your students where to go, I would tell them to go there.
Yeah, I
And
sent-
get a list of art
I sent
directors.
every
Yeah,
illustrator
right.
would ask,
And I love doing stamps because, of course, everybody has stamps on their envelope, so it's fun. So these are the UN. I did 2 series for the UN. And they used to have a big lunch and everything. I don't think they do that anymore. But and the Postal Service, and that was the first time I was in the Rockwell, in the
Yes.
big stamp show.
Yeah, we had done an exhibition of the work of the art of the postage stamp, which is amazing because there's something called the Citizen Stamp Advisory Committee, which actually determines what stamps are going to be produced. But a lot of ideas are put forward by just regular citizens. And so, you know, then illustrators are assigned. There's, I think at the time that
About
we were working
4
on the
or 5
exhibition, there were
designers,
maybe 5
yeah.
art directors. And each of them would commission an illustrator to do a particular series. So these were actually featured in our exhibition. But the thing that's beautiful about the original art is artists can only work 4 times up from the size of an actual
Very
stamp.
small.
So they're very small.
Very hard.
They're literally gems. Was that hard to work that small?
But this, because it was long, it was a little bit easier. But the other stamps that are just one stamp, they're really hard to do. But it's actually a funny story, is that when I was doing these, and I have very, very fine linen canvas, and I asked my husband at the time to glue the canvas down, because I used to go through all gluing this canvas down. And he picked out he had some sail canvas with huge lumps. And he glued that down instead of my fine linen canvas. I was like, I'm trying to, I can't do this. What's wrong? It's lumpy. And, you know, for something that you can only be 4 times up, that was really
Why did they make you
difficult.
work at this skin?
Maybe it doesn't look good if things are big and come down that small. I don't know. That would be my thought, that they've had trouble when something was too big.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. You know, keeping the scale within a reasonable range makes it easier to reproduce.
You
or
have to reproduce
yeah.
so small. And the UN, it's, I think, 6 times up. You
Yeah.
can do it.
But, you know, it's interesting, I think, it really raised my awareness about just the beauty of our postage stamps, you know, when
Yeah,
you go to the
they're
post
beautiful.
office.
Yeah.
And they think I'm crazy. I say, well, what do you have today,
too,
you know?
yeah. There's actually a really, Michael Dees, who's this wonderful, wonderful artist, who's done, I don't know how many stamps, but 60 Minutes. Did anyone see a 60-minute feature on Michael Dees? Maybe about a month ago. If you look it up, if you Google, and you just Google 60 Minutes Michael Dees, it'll come up. Because he's done like the most, he has a Ruth Bader Ginsburg stamp out now, but he's done the Marilyn Monroe, the James Dean. They're just wonderful.
Yeah, they're
He's just such a
magnificent.
wonderful artist.
He was in my class at Pratt,
Oh, he was?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
and he was obsessed with Edgar Allan Poe and would walk around
God,
Brooklyn
he's
in a
an
black cape.
expert.
But a fantastic painter.
He's an expert on that. He has a book, I think, on Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, he is an expert. And here's another series.
Yeah, so these are hard to do because they're small. I had a hard time. But those I went out and bought the plants and photographed them myself. Yeah. And some frogs.
So you were given a little bit of leeway with this assignment.
You could do anything you wanted. It's a printing company that has the frog as their logo. So they give to artists, and you could do what you want as long as you have a frog.
And that's when paper companies were actually giving a lot of work to illustrators.
Yeah, that's right. Used to be wonderful work.
Mm-hmm.
And this is my mural. Anybody been to Trattoria dell'Arte? In New York City, it's on 7th and 57th. Well, that has a funny story. Is Milton Glaser, once again, all these wonderful jobs for Milton. He was hired to design the restaurant, and it was going to be called Il Naso. So he commissioned all these noses, and including noses from different illustrators for a meal, a nose for a meal. So there's a wall of those, and then my husband did this giant plaster nose and other body parts. And then I guess some people complained that it sounded too much like Nazi. Nazi. So he changed the name to Trattoria dell'Arte. So that's why there are noses everywhere.
So you painted this on a large-scale canvas, and then it was actually installed?
Yeah, glued to masonite, and then it was installed.
And
Still
it's
there
still
anyway.
there.
It's been there a long time.
You know, I guess I'd ask if you had any kind of thoughts or advice if you were, as you speak to your students, as you talk to artists who are kind of coming up today, any thoughts about your field as it is now and how to
I think
approach
it's harder because there's more people. There's just many more illustrators, I think, coming out of schools. And I think just try to be yourself, because I think what I see is that the students, like I looked at the old masters, I was interested in paintings. They come through a different lens. They look at anime and cartoons and anime, and that seems to be what leads them, to be an illustrator. And they want to work on their little pads and all of that. And I don't think they appreciate the original art. Like, think about it, maybe it'll be on a wall in a museum someday. And the idea of bigger paintings and grand ambitions and all of that, I don't see so much. But I think try not to imitate what's out there, because maybe by the time you get out of school, that won't even be popular. Things come and go. And I teach history of illustration, and I see that people that were huge to me not that long ago, they don't know who they are. I mean, if I show them Milton Glaser, they don't really know who he is, so, things go out of fashion. So I just try to stop them from imitating what's out there right now and sort of look to the past.
And so is it still important to learn traditional skills like drawing, and for an illustrator,
yes.
how to tell a visual story?
How to tell a story, the narrative, that's what we talk about all the time, the narrative and traditional skills.
If you had an opportunity to have dinner with Rockwell, what would you talk about?
Oh my God.
Question.
I would especially ask him, there's certain paintings that have the lighting effects, which just knock me out, where the head is framed, and it's dark, but it's framed against this light. I would ask him about that, how he did that. I mean, to me, Rockwell is more and more impressive, as I'm older, because the idea that you had this career for so long, and he never fell down on the job, they're brilliant until the end, and to always remain in favor that way, it's very impressive. Besides the work, which of course is impressive too.
Do you have any idea how many paintings you've painted?
Well, I have a book from 1980 that has all my jobs in it, so I know I hit 1,000, over 1,000 jobs. But where will they all go? That's the problem. You want one?
Well, thank you so much for
Oh,
speaking with
thank
us today,
you.
Teresa. It's really an
you,
honor to
Stephanie,
have
for
your work
having me.
here.
It's an
and
honor to
have
be
it on
here.
view. And thank you all for coming. It was so good
Thank
to
you.
have you.
Yeah.
Have a great evening.